We have so many crises in the city right now: homelessness and crime. How do we economic recovery from the pandemic? Charter reform, regardless of what we adopt, is going to be very complicated to implement. And we, as a city, county, and state, have not done a good job of implementing anything in the city. At a time of crime that we're having at these levels, record homicide rates, car thefts, catalytic converter thefts, and rates we have never seen, at least in my adult lifetime, the defunding police looks really like a bad idea. This is always the harder one. When do we tell those segments, you have to accept treatment, or you have to accept the shelter we offer? Or I still lean towards, we have to offer sufficient shelter, and if you are offered shelter and you don't take it, then you face the criminal justice system. And the other extreme, if you come here to use hard drugs on our streets or engage in criminality, we face the criminal justice system. Now the challenge is we don't have enough police on our streets, and our courts system is very much focused on things other than crime and justice right now. I think if I win, it sends a very clear message. So I think there's going to be strong political consensus on the importance of addressing crime.
Rene, thank you for being here with us. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Well, thanks for coming in. I know you were very busy right now. You're just going from event to event, from family to event, and it's just a busy time for you. Is that correct?
That's right. It came from another interview just right before this. So
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for having me.
I appreciate you making time for the Slavic community. I know it's a big community here in Portland, big community in Oregon and in Pacific Northwest. I think the numbers are probably up to 1 million people just on the West Coast, and there's everybody else, all the other states have a big community as well. So a lot of us are here, and a lot of us don't like how this city is going. So we would love to talk to you about that a little bit and see what your plans are to move this city to the right direction.
Sounds
so
great.
We'll be happy to talk to you about that. But before we jump in, like always, I like to have our co-host introduce to those listeners who are tuning in for the first time.
Slavic Vote, we exist to really empower our community by educating, activating in the democratic process in order to maintain the culture, vision, and faith of the community. We really want to see sort of the values of the community represented in our leadership because most of the Slavic community members, they come from the Soviet Union, from communism, and they come from a really bad government, from socialism, from communism. And being here in the United States, for a lot of them, it's breath of fresh air. For a lot of them, it's they distrust the government because they feel like all governments of the world are the same. So, and there's mistrust in the government. So our hope is that our Slavic community will get more engaged, open up more, and speak their voice, their values, their faith, and get our word across there in order to get the right candidates in office and really see that our values, the community values, are represented in whether it be our Senate, our representatives, city council. And so that's what we're here for. And that's our mission, to get the Slavs involved.
Yep. And I think just over the last couple of years, we had thousands of Slavic people registered with us at our different events. We hosted over 100 different registration drives just in a couple of years. And we're proud to really have the community kind of wake up and start paying attention. And we even have multiple candidates who ran for office. And we have a Happy Valley City Councilor candidate who's running in Happy Valley. A great gentleman. He's one of our board members as well. So we're excited for him, and we're hoping for his success. I like to always remind our listeners and everybody else that we are a nonpartisan organization. So we don't endorse candidates. We don't do anything like that. Our main goal is to educate the community and activate them to get more involved. Mm-hmm. So we're excited for the community to trust us and continue building that relationship with our community and with other communities and with our leaders of the city, and just to hopefully get some representation in the government, because sometimes it feels like we're left unheard, and usually it's because we have been not active for a long time. So I think part of it is for that reason, but at the same time we're changing things around. So I just wanted to start off with just asking a question, just like tell us about yourself. We'd love to hear your stories. That's one of my favorite things, is to learn about each candidate, where they, I guess, learn about their story. And I think that a lot of times can really tell why the candidates are running, why the person is so passionate about this position, and just in general, just learning who you are so we can better understand. And so if you want to go ahead and kick that off, I would love to.
Sounds great. Well, again, thanks so much for having me, and for the audience listening in. I'm running real simply because of the crisis in livability in the city of Portland, and in particular challenges of crime and homeless, and the city's inability to confront those two pieces adequately, and just the fundamental challenges that creates to the city. By way of background, I'm a father of 3 Portland-born children, married to my wife. This will be our 20th year. On my maternal side, I am a 5th-generation Portlander. It goes back to the 19th century. On my paternal side, I am the son of a Mexican migrant worker. So Mexican dad meets Anglo mom, and here I am. And
Awesome.
So I'm multicultural. My wife is multicultural as well. Her mother is an immigrant from Ecuador, so we are tied in both to the history of the city as well as what it means to be an immigrant in this country. And both parts shape very directly the way we view the world. By way of background, I'm a business owner, private sector guy. 20 years ago, I started a big law firm downtown. Then after about 5 years, went in-house to work for the biggest private employer in the city of Portland at the time, called KinderCare Knowledge Universe. Was a legal manager, and then led up corporate strategy. And for the last 10 years, I've owned my own business, a small law firm and a little technology company underneath it. Actually bought the technology company, a piece of it, from a Ukrainian in Dallas, Texas. And he still works with us. He's a great craftsman and a tough businessman, too. He struck a tough deal. But I was not involved in politics. I was raising my family. I was building my business, and was involved, very, very involved in the community over the years. Was president of a large soccer club going back 20 years ago. Built the largest youth soccer club in the region, called United PDX. Played a little while for a team called Red Army Soccer Club, which was mostly Ukrainian, a few Russians, but mostly Ukrainian. Most of them were in Vancouver, but deeply tied into the soccer community the entire time. And then led most recently when schools were closed, led the statewide efforts to reopen schools and allow children to have access to sports and to the arts again, as we were learning more about the pandemic, what it did and what it didn't do, and the importance of children having access to schools and to sports and the arts. And but I only got into politics because I became very, very concerned about the direction of the city, in particular the downward trajectory in recent years that has been very noticeable for those of us who've been here a while. That it's real fundamentally on homelessness and crime. We need more police. We need a better police support public safety apparatus. And we need to center victims a little more clearly when we talk about criminal justice system. On homeless, I think we've got a highly segmented population. It's not just economics that drives folks to be on the street. We have a very serious addiction and mental illness challenges in the state, and we need to address it as such. We've got to address the services at that level, prioritize building shelter. And for the people that don't follow the rules, they will deal with the criminal justice system or go back to wherever they came from when they came to the city of Portland. So combination of love, but also personal responsibility and expectations that if you're in the city of Portland, you will follow our rules.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And we'll definitely, majority of our program will be focused on the homelessness and crime. Did you say you were born originally from Portland, or?
So my maternal family goes back a very long time here. I was actually born in Dallas, Texas. My dad was a prosecutor by the time I was born, so we moved around quite a bit in my early life, and then spent the majority of my youth up in Alaska, Anchorage, Alaska.
Wow.
Came
big
back.
Slavic community there, I believe.
Yeah, of good size. Yeah, I think so. And as an old Russian as well in Alaska. But came down for college, played collegiate soccer at Willamette, and then stayed for law school and never really returned.
Got it. So is your family some family still in Dallas and some in Alaska?
I have my father's family is throughout Texas, and my parents are still up in Alaska, at least for the time being, and then a good amount of family in Oregon as well.
Awesome. Well, I know that you just recently had a debate with your opponent, Hardesty, and it was an interesting debate. I heard some interesting things. And do you have any more debates planned in the next 3-4 weeks left?
Yeah, it's a little bit fluid. We may be on OPB on the radio, and that might be as early as this week. And then there were up to 3 television debates. We'll see if all 3 of them still want to do it. But there's a lot of interest in this race, more so than a typical city council race, and we may have up to 3 further on television.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Could you share a little bit, because for those folks maybe who don't know your opponent, who's your opponent, and why exactly is she being so primaried out? I guess there's so much interest of removing that person, and you're the leading candidate for that.
Yeah, so running against Joanne Hardesty. This is her first term as city council. She was previously a state legislator. I think she's attracted a lot of opposition because she's very much been the face of the defund police movement in the city of Portland. And I think that there are others who have pushed for cutting on police, but she's often been kind of the most visual person on that in the city. And at a time of crime that we're having at these levels, record homicide rates, car thefts, catalytic converter thefts, and rates we have never seen, at least in my adult lifetime, the defunding police looks really like a bad idea. And that's a big piece. She's also she's always been an advocate. Sometimes that comes across as really divisive and separates out folks. And we're at a time with some of these complex issues. When you look at our challenges of the unsheltered, it's not like there's just one solution. These are complicated topics, and the divisiveness that she brings has been very problematic. For example, neighborhoods where there's a large amount of unsheltered camps nearby, and on the way for children to walk to school. It is very okay for neighborhoods to be upset about unsheltered camps, but she sometimes criticizes neighborhoods for being upset about that. The same thing with the illegally parked vehicles and RVs that are parked for weeks, if not months. She oversees PBOT, Portland Bureau of Transportation, and had been very reluctant to move those cars and RVs because she described it as someone's homes. But you live in a neighborhood that's impacted by those vehicles, by those RVs, or it's in front of your business, it's not a little thing. And it brings crime, and it's not just the people living in those RVs, it's sometimes the criminality that comes with it.
Right.
And so she's been perceived to be standing in the way of cleaning up homeless camps, has been very antagonistical towards the police, and has attempted to cut funding for police at a time when we really needed more police, in a lot of people's opinion.
Right. Well, I believe she's also, like you mentioned, she's behind PBOT, or she at least oversees PBOT. And I believe you were driving down the Division Street, and you were met with a beautiful, what is it called? The concrete slab.
Diverters,
Yeah. So I know there's our friend Fatima who owns the Russian store, the Roman Russian store. She's been very outspoken and vocal against that because it's been just an issue. What are some of the things you heard that also, what are some of the businesses being affected by this? I think it's called median. Yeah.
So, well, I think let's take a step back when we look at the different parts of the city. You go close in east side, inside of Cesar Chavez, the close in neighborhoods of Portland, very big cycling community, biking community. I live on the east side. I've lived on the east side 20 years, and I like to cycle close in. You know, I often go downtown. I cycle. That's great. And we've also had historically good public transit close in. A lot of people like to take the bus. As you go further into East Portland, it is much more of a car culture. And I think one of the challenges has been we have taken a inner East Side inner city mindset and tried to force it on Far East Portland. And so I hear that from Latino business owners, from Slavic business owners, from Asian business owners and community members, that it feels like there's an attempt to force cycling on communities who they may not be opposed to cycling, but a lot of the what we're doing in transportation as you get east of 82nd is an attempt to replicate what's in close-in East Side. They haven't necessarily asked the communities if that's what they want, and what the left turn signal as you're talking about, all it's doing is forcing the left turn a few blocks down and forces people to do U-turns or go through neighborhoods. I'm not sure that's really the safety we were all looking for fire trucks. The fire union has endorsed me as well, in addition to the police union. Trying to turn a fire truck on some of those left turns now with the meridians it creates its own separate safety concerns, and that's it's another minute to get to a fire or to rest. I mean, firefighters are often your first responders for other medical emergencies, and I think those are pieces that I've certainly heard many complaints of, not just in the ethnic communities, but many east of Portland of all races. It's kind of that there's this attempt to force a type of transportation that may not be fully embraced in different parts of the city.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely she's been very outspoken, like I said. So Andre is also a business owner and has a business in Portland. Andre, do you have any examples of how maybe Hardesty's policies affected your businesses that you were involved with? Has it been a problem?
Well, yeah. One of our businesses, we have a small manufacturing plant, USDA approved manufacturing plant division in 122nd, and so we used to have delivery trucks like deliver produce to us, and recently, with all these additions, they can't even send just have those like box trucks. They even can't send those now. So we're forced to use a different supplier now that has like really like small vans to deliver produce, because no trucks are gonna fit or can turn around with those medians. And I feel like everybody that I talk to, friends, family, everybody is just really mad about those things. Those like seriously, it's like unnecessary, and that place just like wastes away because you can't drive on there, people can't walk in there. It's just like concrete.
Yeah.
Very unfortunate.
Yeah. And so if you end up beating Hardesty, is there any plans or is there a path to either remove that or adjust it so it's not as dangerous as it has been so far? What have you thought about that at all?
Well, let me take a step back. So when if I am to prevail in November, the mayor will decide which bureaus are assigned to me. So I may not get PBOT. In fact, there's a very good chance that if I defeat Joanne, I will not get PBOT, that will go to another commissioner. At least that's what we're hearing right now. That's a mayor's decision. I haven't quite figured out how, if and when we tear them out, but one of the questions has to be, like, going forward, transportation in this part of the city. And when I say, whether you say east of 60th, east of 205, east 82nd, just the different history in the city. We just need to make transportation policy that makes sense for those communities and doesn't impose a kind of central city mindset on the rest of the city. That's what I've very much committed to. I just don't know if I'll get PBOT. That's only the mayor decides that. So.
Right. Okay. And do you know because I know there's some changes in the charter as well.
Yes.
And does that affect anything that's also who would hold those positions?
Yeah, so the charter reform, we're likely looking at two different scenarios. So there will be one that's on the ballot in November, and under that, the commissioners will no longer oversee bureaus. They'll be assigned to a city manager, and the city commissioners would become much more legislative, would pass law but wouldn't oversee bureaus. that would take effect 2 years afterwards. So that would take effect in essentially 2025. And no one knows if that's going to pass right now. It started very popular because people want government change, but some people think the proposed change is too complicated, is too much experimental. So we'll see how the next 4 weeks play out that. And then there was an alternative proposed last week that if the proposal that we're voting on in November does not pass, that will be on in May. That has some similarities and differences. Still would remove from commissioners oversight of bureaus. It would put that under a central administration, so to speak. But it would have less experimental. It would be more just a single representative per district.
Right, and I believe Vadim, who I believe oversees that charter advisory committee, I believe, if I'm not wrong. I know he who led or was one of the leaders of leading those efforts for those changes. I think he also currently is against those changes, and he's suggesting to vote no for that. Is that correct?
I think he was part of the charter commission. He was one of the leaders there. He is recommending voting against what's on November. I think he may be supportive of the one that would come on in May, but he would be no in November. I think he's leaning towards what if it doesn't pass the alternative.
Right. Have you taken some time to look at those changes, and where do you stand on those changes?
Well, so the what I like about them, I do think moving to professional oversight of bureaus is a step in the right direction. I think right now we elect too many advocates that are very focused on one or two issues, and then they're entrusted to oversee bureaus they know nothing about. They have to spend a year just learning the ins and outs of transportation policy or environmental policy or how parks work. And so I think both the model that's on in November as well as the alternative in May move towards what we would call professional management of bureaus. So I think that's a positive. I think in both cases we will have geographical representation. So right now I run citywide. So I need to get as many of 240,000 voters to vote, which is roughly what we'll vote in November. Under both scenarios, we would have designated districts, designated parts of the city that you'd be elected from. I think that's a smart play too. Not all parts of the city are the same, and so more specific. You elect somebody who's very focused on your community, so to speak. The parts that I don't like about November is that you would have more than one member representing each district. And then the question is, who do you call when there's a problem, right? Yeah. There's 3 different people in your district. Which one do I call if I'm not happy? It's already, our government's already so confusing. It's very hard for citizens to understand what the city does, what the county does, what the state does. Just that, it's not easy to understand. Mm-hmm. And so you're adding on, even at the city level, you'd have 3 different people to call. I think that's not good for what we would call accountability. It's also introducing a concept called ranked choice voting. And that's not something we've really done in Portland before. And you vote for the top 3 candidates, but then your vote moves to your second choice depending on who gets the most votes in each round. And it's more confusing. It's not simple. Under our current model in what is proposed in May, it's just who had the most votes. So it's a simpler model to understand. And I'm worried with the complexity of what is proposed in November that it will lead to folks arguing that something's not right, that something's not done correctly. It's just complicated. Anytime things complicated, it causes questions, right?
Right. So your recommendation is also not to vote no on that?
Right now, I'm no for November, and I'm leaning towards yes for what is proposed in May. So first no, then maybe yes.
When you mentioned ranked choice voting, I believe are they specifically suggesting that model, or is it? I believe they were originally talking about the star voting. Is that the one or is that they changed it up?
Yeah, well, I mean, so what I call ranked choice, it's got a couple
similar,
different. Yeah, it's that is part of the proposal in November. What the proposal for May is saying is, let's vote on that separate. If Portland voters understand that and like it, we can go add that later. We don't need it out of the gate because it's because the other thing about charter reform. We have so many crises in the city right now: homelessness and crime. How do we economic recovery from the pandemic? Charter reform, regardless of what we adopt, is going to be very complicated to implement. And we, as a city, county, and state, have not done a good job of implementing anything recently, right? Anything large scale. So I like the May one more than November because it doesn't try to change as much in a short amount of time. I just don't. I worry we're not capable of executing, completing successfully such a complicated change.
Right. Well, thank you for that. Andre, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'm curious, Rene, what's your faith background, religious background? How do you think about those things?
So I was raised Episcopalian, and I was married in a church that my great-grandfather was the architect of, actually. But all of my children have been raised Episcopalian. The closest church to my house is actually a Catholic church, so I go there when I go to church because I can walk to it. And my children at different times have been in Catholic or parochial schools. They've gone back and forth between public and parochial. Faith is an element of my life, is an element of who I am as a person. My wife does not come from a religious family. I come from some religion. She comes from none. And we raising our children to appreciate that part of life, but also make their own choices as they navigate into adulthood.
Okay, cool, interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, one thing that we mentioned that we wanted to kind of dive deeper into some of the issues that we're seeing in Portland. Obviously, crime and homelessness are probably most visible, and the community, I know personally, are not very happy about, and a lot of them are either moving to outside the cities or completely moving. We saw a huge exodus out of state of Oregon and Washington in the last 4 or 5 years, and my family, pretty much all of them, moved to South Carolina. We have a lot of families moving to Florida, Texas, and a lot of them who can't move too far. They just move to Washington, Vancouver, where it's so slightly better than Portland. But it's slowly going that direction as well, because I think a lot of these policies from Portland are affecting Vancouver as well. So I guess if we can maybe speak a little bit about that, what are your thoughts? I know you briefly mentioned already. What can be done? What can we do differently? I think one thing that comes to mind is, is there a way to enforce some of this homelessness that we're having? Is there a way to enforce, to be a little more firm on the folks who are living outside? What can we do to be gentle and at the same time be firm on changing some of these ways?
So I think the first piece that's important to acknowledge is not all of the unsheltered or homeless are the same. Right. We have different segments inside that population. And let's start with the extremes, on both extremes. Yeah. Families impacted by the economic calamity of the pandemic lose a job, end up homeless. Sometimes end up on the streets, but usually end up in some sort of shelter. This is a community that we have a moral responsibility to support. This city also and state releases hundreds, if not thousands, of foster children every year without social capital, without connections. We have a responsibility to this group to help them transition in adulthood. Other extreme, we have an element of criminality that has preyed on our compassion, that hides out in our unsanctioned camps, at times is organizing crime in our unsanctioned camps, whether it's auto thefts, drug dealing, sex trafficking. Zero tolerance for this group. And if you prey on our compassion and are engaging in criminal activity, we're going after the criminality. We're not going after you because you're homeless, but if you're using an unsanctioned camp as a base for criminal activity, no sympathy, enforce the law. And then there are groups in between that are the harder ones. The harder ones are those who have addiction, substance use disorder, or mental illness that is improperly treated. So this is always the harder one. When do we tell those segments, you have to accept treatment, or you have to accept the shelter we offer, or you face the criminal justice system? I still lean towards, we have to offer sufficient shelter. And if you are offered shelter and you don't take it, then you face the criminal justice system. And it's recognizing that there may be some segments that have legitimate reasons they can't take the shelter. Again, the example of a family with children, they don't want to go into a shelter where there is untreated mental illness or addiction. They don't feel safe for the mother. They don't feel safe for the children. Maybe they actually may think living on the street is safer than some shelters. And we have to address that and meet them where they're at. But the other extreme, if you come here to use hard drugs on our streets or engage in criminality, we face the criminal justice system. Now, the challenge is we don't have enough police on our streets, and our courts system is very much focused on things other than crime and justice right now. And so one of the things we're looking at is, so in our current system, our courts are all county, and so it's called a circuit court. Under state law, a city can establish its own municipal court. And so the city controls that court. And we haven't had it in Portland in over 50 years. We're looking at reintroducing a municipal court. We can't prosecute felonies under state law. We can only prosecute misdemeanors. But that means we can prosecute if someone's stealing a vehicle, a catalytic converter, if they're petty theft, we can prosecute them as a city and not be dependent on the county. So when I talk about the unsheltered, first, let's focus on the elements we can help and the really bad behaviors that are going on in a segment of that population. And we prosecute that section. We need more police. We need a strong court system to do that effectively. But that's a big component. And then longer term, we have to build more shelter, offer that up. And if folks don't take it, then they have to face the criminal justice system.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you. And speaking of crime, we've seen a rise in crime 3 times in the last couple of years at least. What do you think, what are some of the first steps that you could take just in the first, let's say 100 days, right? To hopefully start turning things around. Do you have that, do you think you'll have that much influence on the board to make those changes, or is it going to be more complicated than just yourself?
I think if I win, it sends a very clear message. Yeah. I've been very clear on crime and homelessness. That's how I prevailed into the runoff. It is, and we're all watching folks leave the city. So if I win this, I think there's going to be strong political consensus on the importance of addressing crime. Some of the things we can do, we do need more police. We're near the bottom in terms of number of police per population in cities our size in the whole country. That makes it too long when you call 911 for someone to actually respond. We just need more police. And we can't solve that overnight. That's going to take multiple years of recruiting because it takes about 2 years to develop a police officer effectively. But the part of it is just we got to start now and gradually adding police every year. And second is just the rhetoric that comes from City Hall. One of the things that the incumbent Joanne Harsey has done very badly is that she falsely accused the police of starting fires during the riots. She uses language that is very demeaning to police. That makes it very hard to recruit and attract, much less retain police officers in the city of Portland. So we need to calm the rhetoric coming out of City Hall when it comes to police. And we need to balance police accountability with public safety, but that means what is the language that's coming out of City Hall? Does it attract good police officers or not? That's something we have to shift, and we need to shift that right now. Again, the municipal court, we think, is a component. Because one of the challenges right now is you arrest somebody, they quickly get released, and the court system at the county level is so far behind that it may be a very long time before they actually ever get a day in court. Municipal court, the idea is we'll just focus on certain kinds of crimes and we'll really work to prosecute those much more efficiently. And we know that a lot of the property crimes are driven by addiction. And so part of it is firmness, but also if someone is suffering from addiction, it's trying to divert them into addiction services. And it's either jail or addiction services for a certain segment.
Awesome.
I want to take a moment to thank all of our sponsors for allowing us to be here on this program and all of our future programs. Some of the sponsors are Pilmeni, Nina Martinov, a real estate broker, America's Best Realty, Exceptional Homes, Dream House Construction, Imperial Cabinets, Solution 8020, Gold Cup Coffee House, Red Hills Construction, Ciberoni, Lanos Floral, Third House Media, and some others. Without these companies, without these organizations, we couldn't be on this program. And if you would like to be our next sponsor, reach out to us by visiting slavicvote.org. We would love to partner with you and further our mission. Thank you very much.
And then also, obviously, I mentioned Pilmeni, which Andre owns. By the way, speaking of Pilmeni, you should, whenever you have free time, which you might not have a lot, you should definitely stop by and try some of the dumplings that Andre sells.
Love it.
Great
Love
business,
to do
great
that.
family business. Andre, share a little bit about that and about your Pilmeni, because you were right there in the Portland area.
Yeah.
And you're affected as well.
Yeah, our vision behind Pilmeni is really to bring like the Slavic culture to Portland. You know, Portland is a great, some of the most diverse kitchens in the world, with food carts and with so many small mom and pop restaurants. So we really wanted to showcase the Slavic, the Ukrainian, the Russian, the Belarusian food here. Bring some of our dumplings, our borscht, our ethnic values and culture. So we have a food truck that we opened up here in Portland, Southeast Portland, just off of Madison and 10th Avenue. And so hopefully we'll develop this into brick and mortar restaurants, but for now, just a food cart. So we're really, really proud to be here in the heart of Portland and serve up some Slavic eats. So
I'd love to come visit.
yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, it's just 15 minutes from here, and I think you'd really enjoy it.
What's the address?
So Madison 10th Street.
Madison and 10th. Oh, okay.
Madison and 10th.
Oh, okay. I know exactly where that is.
There's like
Okay.
a pod.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
called Pod's called Hawthorne Asylum
Yeah.
pod. Yeah, and we're inside that pod.
Oh,
yeah.
I know. No, I know exactly where you are.
It's popping. It's a really popular location. A lot of people come.
I know they're
really travel.
constructing more and more, just making it a lot more comfortable, indoor seating and things like that. So
Yeah.
it's has a lot of good potential. And then during obviously this hard time that the Slavic community is going through with the Ukraine-Russian war, I know that you were able to get some new customers.
Yeah,
that,
we've seen a lot of support. People come through it and they're like, hey, we support Ukraine. Is there anything? We had people donate money and that we sent to Ukraine, to the missions there in Kiev. And so
you actually
it's
have
really
some
cool.
refugees working there, right, as well.
Yes. I have some refugees working sort of like part-time, getting them ability to earn a wage here in Portland.
Wonderful.
So yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, and I believe I know that Fatima also has some refugees working at her facility. So I know the Slavic community has been impacted by this war. Do you have any thoughts on just what's going on in the whole Russia-Ukraine war? Has that affected at all your campaign?
I think that we have a mix in the city of, and the focus on Ukraine, rightfully so, has shed a light on our immigrant community in the Slavic population. I think it's very interesting when you compare folks who come from other parts of the world for opportunity to the city. They come here to build businesses and raise family and build organizations. And sometimes they're running from really bad situations in their home country, war, social strife. But I hope Portland continues to be very welcoming to those that want to build and that come here to raise families, to build businesses, to contribute. Sometimes I'm harder on those that want to use hard drugs on our streets, right? And I think one of the challenges as we emerge from the pandemic, or we emerge from recent years in the city of Portland, is how do we balance that compassion with sternness, right? And we truly need immigrants in this city for diversity. Tend to bring younger population and new energy that wants to build. We need more and more of that from across the globe. But again, sometimes we say to others, if you're not coming here to contribute, go back to Texas or wherever you came from. But I I have run very focused on city issues, not as focused on national or international, and just because of what city commissioner does.
Yeah. No, for sure.
And I'm curious, Rene, like what made you like run for office? Is that something that you're like, would always want to be a politician, or like how did that get started?
No, I wasn't looking to run for office. It was I started that organization called Ed 300 that was trying to get kids back in school and sports reestablished, and that was the first time that I had ever really been involved in politics. And it was very difficult getting schools reopened in the pandemic. It was lots of arguments there, and that experience, though, eventually the governor mandated the school districts all had to reopen, and that was largely us lobbying to do that. And what I saw is, you can focus with data, and you can find a centrist coalition, not extremists politically. It's find the center. And there was a lot to agree upon. We had Democrats, Republicans, nonpartisan, urban, rural, suburban, all agreeing kids need to be back in school and they have access to sports and to arts. And I went through that experience. I was not political until that. And I was like, well, the city is really struggling right now, and we don't talk about things the right way. We always want to make it some national debate or argument. It's never about what's going on in Portland and how to solve that. Could we take the experience and how we reopen schools and then apply it to the challenges of the city? And it was also my wife, as I mentioned, I own a little technology company in Texas. We were looking around. We love our city, but is this still the right place to raise our children? Is the direction it was, and it was a decision. You stay and fight and build, or you run. And it was a hard choice, but but we could not stay and accept the city the way it was becoming. And and the hard part is, and also the inspiration, is this city used to be better. It used to be a better city. And it's like, that wasn't our imagination. It was one of the safest cities in the United States. People forget that. Major U.S. cities, Portland was one of the safest. And so, and it's a beautiful city when it's taken care of, when it's clean. And so that was it. It was just that we either fight or fly. And if we're not going to fly, then you can't be passive. You can't just sit in the back seat anymore. Not at this point in time. And it's kind of a moment. I'll do what I can to help the city, and then someday I'll go back to running my business. It's not a forever thing.
Well, you mentioned briefly that you were kind of involved in the education section. Have you, when you were lobbying the government, let's just say that, did you get any opposition from I know you were endorsed by the firefighter union. Did you get any opposition from the teachers union?
Yes, they really don't like me. It's like, and they haven't forgotten.
So the OEA, right, is the Oregon Education Association.
OEA and the Portland Association of Teachers.
Right. So they don't like you, is that what you're saying?
There's a lot of teachers that support me, but the teachers union is, they're very much supporting Joanne. And here's the interesting thing that I didn't necessarily know until I started running. Everyone assumes labor is all the same, and it's not. A bunch of the trade unions are supporting us. The IBEW, which is the electricians, the construction, Columbia Pacific construction workers, in addition to police and fire. It's Teamsters just endorsed us on Friday. That's a 100-year-old union. Oh. Everyone assumes that all of these unions want the same things. Well, that's not necessarily true. When you talk about Teamsters and you talk about IBEW and steel workers, they want their workers to be safe in the city, and they want projects to keep coming to the city. And they look at the way things are going right now. We're not going to attract capital. We're not going to attract projects if it continues to be unsafe and unfriendly to business. So I'm a businessman. I was talking to these unions, and I was like, we speak the same language. We're talking about the same thing. And it's like, but it's just interesting contrast. Portland Association of Teachers, they have some social justice things they're really pushing. And they're also, at least the union's never forgiven that I pushed back on reopening schools. So I'll take it. It's far, and I still have a lot of teachers that support me. Yeah. Our public schools are very, very important. We need to make sure they continue to be well supported, and maybe time heals that fight.
Well, our Slavic community have for a long time trusted the public school system, and they've I've grew up, went through the public system. All of us, most of the Slavic have, because we have big families. Our parents cannot just afford hiring, a daycare. But what we're seeing now, a lot of them are just having to choose between public school and homeschool, because the education system is breaking down. And we're seeing, obviously you've experienced some of that. We're seeing just this, radical agenda a lot of times being pushed into the education system, or even just not, wanting to even teach the basics. Do you have any kind of influence when you are elected?
No, city council doesn't have any oversight of schools. This is a separate board, and what I would encourage is folks in your community to get engaged, because it's very democratic, and the voice of parents are sometimes afterthoughts there, and it's. But we're all paying for those public schools, and they're so important. I mean, there's no institution more important in many respects in the city of Portland than the public school system.
And it's the biggest institution as well, or the biggest agency of the government.
I think that's right. I mean, and you're talking roughly. We have 50,000, a little bit less, but roughly 50,000 K through 12 children in the city of Portland, I believe, and it is a big part of what drives people to decide where to live. Is it good schools or not good schools, right? It's it trains our future workers and our future contributors to society. So it's essential. But city council doesn't have direct connections. Sometimes city council has stepped in if there's inadequate funds for the public schools. There's been some moments that the city council has stepped in for that. Particularly mayors have sometimes said we need to not let the schools close. Oversimplification, but but that's the extent of it.
Right. So you're saying you were instrumental in your organization helping to reopen the schools in Portland, or the statewide?
Statewide. That was a statewide effort. And eventually we got the governor to mandate that every school district had to reopen by a date certain. And I don't know that schools would have reopened in places like Portland in 2021 without that mandate.
Right. Well, I'm pretty much run out of the questions that I prepared. Andre, do you have anything else you wanted to add before we start closing down the program?
Yeah, I just want to confirm some information for our listeners. There is 4 city council seats, correct?
There are 4 currently, yes, and only one's in a runoff this November.
In a runoff, and that's the one that you're essentially running for, and that's Joanne's hardest seat.
That's correct.
Okay, and Ted Wheeler, for example, if there's a vote and it's split between 50-50, Ted Wheeler breaks the tie, correct?
That's right. And he'll technically, under the current system, he would typically vote.
Every time.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, but it's usually a 5, all 5 will vote.
Okay. Interesting. So this is, your position is, in this position, it's not like you're going to go into city council and change everything, right? So this is one of the 5 members who will speak your voice and will introduce this different perspective to city council.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right. And I think you always have to think how you're going to get to 3 votes. That's the politics is how do you get to 3 votes? I do think that I've been very clear on crime and homelessness. Joanne is also very clear in her perspectives on some of those things. So I think that there's a very clear message based on who wins this race for the other commissioners as to what Portlanders want. And I'm optimistic that will give us the ability to get to 3 votes a lot, on some fundamental crime and homeless issues.
And we definitely need some fresh ideas about how to change the city because, it has been getting worse and worse. We really need some fresh perspectives. This year, hopefully in 2 years when the next election as well gets someone fresh in there with new ideas. So thank you for running.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I'm curious. So I know that Council Maps, he's probably an ally with you. He probably leans where you stand.
Maps.
Yeah. That's right.
What are some other current councilmen or women that would align with kind of where you stand that you could probably ally with and work together?
I think maps. I think I think that Ryan is put in charge of housing, so it's a very difficult position right now. And right now the city, I think, is going towards more shelter, not waiting to clean up camps, but the county isn't as sure. And so that's the other complexity here. Ryan has to deal with that. He has to not just address what the city wants to do, but work with the county a lot. I think if I prevail, he's going to be a strong ally too. And I think the mayor too. I think the mayor is trying through executive decisions, trying to be more proactive on homeless this year. The problem is sometimes he's going it alone, and without the other commissioners getting their bureaus aligned around the direction of, it makes it very difficult to implement. But I think we're going to have 4 votes on some of these pieces, honestly. And it's just a commissioner who consistently objects and stands in the way can really undermine not just the high-level decision, but implementation. You're talking good government is a big organization, so there's lots of ways that if people don't agree, even if the vote went a certain way, they can undermine underneath. And so that's going to be as important, though. We're getting the votes, but getting the execution so that, because one of the things the mayor has started to do, he has forced some of the RVs to move. That should have been Joanne doing that. He went around her and started mandating some of the RVs move. Problem is, do they just come back 3 months later, right, or 3 weeks later? And that's this. And same thing with some of the sweeps. And so we're looking at trying to find a pathway that's more sustainable and that we continue to execute on. And it's like, if you move that RV is illegally parked, we're going to take it away from you if you continue to park in the city. I mean, that's at some point. If it's not in your home, if it's not on your property, and you're parking in right away continuously, it's a little more sternness there.
And often stolen RV.
Yes.
A lot of them are stolen.
Same with the vehicles that are parked for an extended period of time. And one of the things we stopped doing is partially because DMV wasn't issuing tags and license plates for a little bit, but we stopped pulling over cars that had no tags or license plates. And there was also concern that certain communities were being targeted. Immigrant communities, Black communities, Latino communities were getting pulled over too much by the police with expired tags and no license plates. But what that did is made it so easy for criminals. They just remove the tags and license plate, and police will never pull over just for that reason. That used to be a way we caught a lot of car thieves. And so we need to go back and rebalance that a little bit. DMV is now back open. There's no excuse not to have a license plate or tags on your car. And we still have to watch the issue of over policing and make sure that's not happening. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter your race. If you don't have a license plate, you don't have tags, you should be pulled over in the city of Portland. And it's partially not just to make sure what exhaust is coming out of your car, but to make sure that vehicle isn't stolen. And certainly, if you're parked in a right of way extended periods of time, that's the highly likelihood of something stolen or that there's other activity going on there that's illegal. There are some folks that don't have a place to park that car. They don't have a home. And so the balance is finding the criminals and stopping that behavior and prosecuting, and also helping the folks that don't have a place to park that vehicle, that are trying to do the right thing, but they're down on the luck because life is not going well. Then how do we support, but we can do both of those as a society. And where Portland went too far is to assume everyone's economic and that there's no criminality. Well, that's I think we're seeing some of the problems with that. Both of those things can be true, and we deal with the two in different ways.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you again. This obviously is one of the most anticipated elections. I think a lot of people are paying attention. I'm just curious, and you don't have to weigh in on this question at all if you don't want to. The other most anticipated election, obviously in Oregon, is the governor election. I don't know if you took time at all to look at what's going on in that area, or if you even wanted to weigh in because it's so divided and so interesting to watch. I just wanted to see if you have built any kind of relationship with any of the candidates, and if you have anybody maybe that you prefer over others. Again, I know if you don't want to get into that, you don't have to, but I'm curious your thoughts on the governor.
So I have met both Drazen and Kotek. I've met both of them. I've never met Betsy Johnson. And I think, it is very, very important that city commissioners and the city government work well with whoever is elected at the state level. There's so many things that they intersect with, right? And so what I can say is I will work well with any of them. And sometimes I think that our mayor and our governor, even though they're both Democrats, same party, they don't get along, and that has not been good for the city. And so, regardless of party, we have to work together. And I think but they're very different. They're different politically. They're different, different personalities. So I'll leave it at that. But it is very important that the city government work well with the state government.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know that I don't know if both Drazen and Johnson mentioned that. I know Drazen mentioned that if she's elected, she's gonna, I think she called it, proclaim a state of emergency with homelessness. Is that at all? Does she have any kind of weight when she says that with that kind of measure, or? What
it really matters is what comes from declaring an emergency, right? So the statement is one thing, but then what do you do to follow up on that? And some of the things that the state can do to really help us is both on addiction and mental illness. These are a big part of, so we talk about the homeless, but the folks on our street we often refer to as the unsheltered, and there's such high rates of addiction and mental illness in those populations. We badly need the state's help on that piece. So she can get dollars flowing more effectively to those communities. I think that's going to be a great thing. But the other parts about building shelter, this is one of the challenges for the city. Should we be the state's repository for all of the homeless? And sometimes it feels that way, right? So getting support from the state that the whole state owns homelessness. The whole state has a challenge of the unsheltered. The whole state has to share in the solution for that. I'm hopeful that's what we get from our governor.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm looking forward to the November 8th. I think it's going to be very exciting to watch. I'm guessing you're probably going to have your own election watch party and hopefully be celebrating. And so I think we're really excited to see what's going to happen in November. I'm hoping the community will see a bright light at the end of this month, at the end of that election. And we have, like we mentioned, we have so many Ukrainian members coming here. It's going to, in a matter of a couple of years, they're going to decide if they're going to stay here or not.
Right.
And it depends on the direction of the city, direction of the state. So there's a lot of them. I know our churches are, many of them, I know Andres Church are filled with new Ukrainian refugees. So we see a huge change in just the landscape of the Slavic community has changed as well. So it's going to be interesting to watch how that progresses. And I'm hoping the city moves in the right direction and keeps these folks here. It's only going to make things more interesting. And it's going to be really exciting.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, thank you for being here. We're unfortunately are done with this program. I just want to remind folks, if you want to find more of these programs, if you want to watch some of our previous programs, you can find all those on our YouTube page. Just visit our website as well, slavicvote.org, where you can find all of our previous episodes. All of our material, all of our resources that are available are all on our website, slavicvote.org. And like always, we have about a month left. Today is the 8th, I believe, so it's literally 1 month away.
That's right.
Today marks 1 month away from the election. So we've been preparing for this for the last 2 years. We've been doing this for 4 years now, for almost 4 years. So we're almost coming full circle of where we started, because we started right after the election of the governor. So it'll be really interesting to see how this election turns out. So I want to remind folks, again, if you want to be registered to vote, you have only a couple of weeks left. Make sure you're registered to vote. Make sure you are properly registered to vote. Make sure you're updated all the information. And before we close in, do you mind just addressing the community in that camera right there? Just what do you want to tell the Slavic community? Kind of, I always recommend just like motivate them to get out and vote. What would you like to tell them so they turn out in the record numbers and hopefully turn the state around?
Yeah, well, this is really one of the elections of a lifetime. Our beautiful city is facing challenges that many of us thought was unfathomable a short time ago. And don't run, don't flee, stay and fight. This is a beautiful city worth doing that for, and we just need your help. And that starts by voting in November. So again, thank you for having me, and use your constitutional right and vote, please.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much again. We really enjoyed this program. I'm hoping once you're elected, we can have you back on. Just
Sounds
to
great.
Kind of
I'd love
update
to.
us and,
Thank you for tuning in to Slavic Vote Live. We really appreciate you listening to this program. Don't forget to click that like button, subscribe, and share this program with your friends and family. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Кандидаты. Стремление. Новая программа Slavic Vote Live. Каждую неделю в прямом эфире. Slavic Vote Live.